So when I first ran in 2010, what prompted me to run, in large part, was the cancellation of the original LRT line. I remember sitting in my kitchen and seeing the newspaper and seeing that we were going to be paying out almost $40 million to settle a lawsuit, and tens of millions more in lost work and sunk costs. And I remember saying to my wife, there's got to be a better way. And that was one of the main reasons that I threw my name into the hat in 2010, and I ran on that I would see LRT through. Along the way, I sat as the vice chair of the Transit Commission, then I moved on to chair of the Transportation Committee for 6 years. Through many of the public meetings, the almost 300 public meetings we had, where we consulted the public, we worked with the public, and we made changes based on what the public asked us and the concerns that they raised. So this particular issue is near and dear to my heart. It's an important issue to me, and as Councillor Harder, yes, I named you, as Councillor Harder said, it's an important issue for the million or so residents that we're going to have very soon in this city. It's for everybody. It goes right across, whether you're suburban, urban, or rural. So let's break it down by the numbers for all of those taxpayers, all of those residents. We spent $6 million so far in procurement. If we pull the plug today, that $6 million we're never going to get back. It's at least another 2 years to go down the procurement process again at further cost. Probably not the full 600, but significant cost again to follow the procurement. As soon as we cancel and saying we're not going to go ahead, we have 3 proponents out there that were legally obligated. Yeah, there's that term again, legally obligated, to pay $12 million to each, and that's $36 million right off the top, that we get absolutely no benefit for our taxpayers from. So, yes, I am in favor of this. We have momentum, we're moving forward. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect, and if we wait for it to be perfect, we're never going to do it. The systems in Chicago, New York, Boston, they all have issues. But I have worked very closely with this team, and I would be remiss not to take this opportunity to thank the senior management team, to thank the consultants that have worked hard on this file. I've worked very closely with all of you, and I want to take this opportunity also to thank Councillor Blais, who was part of the negotiating group. And you know, this is a significant step forward for our city, and to step back now and not proceed is going to be costly in terms of time, is going to be costly in terms of real money, and it's going to be costly in a very real way for the citizens. It's going to get to point B in an efficient, comfortable, energy-friendly way. All those things are going to happen if we don't proceed. And to get hung up on legal advice that we're receiving from a lawyer who says, it's not that I don't want to, it's not that I wouldn't like to, it's that I cannot, because you set me down a path, you gave me direction, I followed that direction, I incorporated your instructions, and the result is we have a legally binding contract that says I can't share that information, and if I do, I'm going to put you at risk. So to get hung up on getting legal advice that by all intents and purposes appears to be in our best interest, as Councillor Blais indicated, then I don't know what to say. This is a project that needs to go forward. It's a project that we have too much invested in. We put in all of the protections. We had external legal counsel. We had external financial advisory. We had a fairness commissioner. Mr. Manconi has reached out to transit experts in all the other similar climate-type cities, whether it be Chicago or Boston, New York. We've done all of that. And so I would urge all of my colleagues, new and all, I urge you all to do this. And now is when Councillor Hubley usually jumps in with his train whistle, but we need to do this. We really do. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Councillor. Councillor Meehan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I first decided to run in 2018. So I'm one of the new councillors. And the reason that I decided to run was because I was very frustrated with the amount of congestion in the south end of the city that I thought was well, it's hard to understand given the brains in the city and the desire for the city to grow smartly. I am probably one of the biggest boosters of LRT Phase 2. I was around in 2006 and remember very vividly when the South Line was canceled and was just as disappointed as everyone around this council table. So I am a huge supporter of LRT. This is our future. I was part of the group today that asked for more time to examine this contract. And I'll just say before, I plan to vote. My council colleague from the South is not here, but I plan to vote for this contract today. There is nothing that I would do to jeopardize light rail in this city. But I had questions, and here's why. If Phase 1 was up and running efficiently, if thousands of OC Transpo bus riders had not been inconvenienced and faced hardship for months without reason, if those people hadn't had that happen, if SNC-Lavalin was an upstanding company that wasn't the subject of corruption charges and bribery and had a great performance record, I wouldn't be asking questions here today. And I really am quite frankly disturbed by the characterization by some members of this council that we don't have a right to ask questions. That's why we were elected. We have to provide oversight. We have to provide I don't want to say sober second thought, but to ask questions that people at home have questions. We need to get answers in order to make the best informed decision. And the fact that we feel pressed by the timeline, you know, it should have some bearing around this council table. Are we just rubber stampers? We all believe in light rail, and to characterize us as not caring about light rail is wrong. But we want to make sure that the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. That's all we're saying. We're for light rail, but don't characterize it any other way. We want to make sure that we're getting the best deal possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I came into today's meeting, honestly, not knowing how I was going to vote today. It's probably the most difficult day I've spent on City Council since I was elected in 2014. And I often say, and I've had this conversation with the General Manager of Transportation, that for the most part, my residents aren't going to be on the train. Some of them will, a few of them will, but it skirts the perimeter of the ward. But how we will benefit is the same way all of you will benefit. We will have less emissions, we will have less buses on the road. Your residents everywhere else, east and west especially, will be able to get through the downtown because of Phase 1, and you'll be able to come in from further because of Phase 2. So I did. I came in, I struggled with this. I continue to. Little of what I've heard today has given me confidence that we have chosen the best proponent. I do not believe that we could not have been told that every proponent met at least the bare minimum requirement of 70% threshold without divulging any other information. But what I do have to believe, and it's the reason I asked Mr. Manconi the question, and I didn't ask outside legal and the team that evaluated this process, this contract, and it's the reason I asked Mr. Manconi if he believes that, in his professional opinion, we are doing the right thing here today. And he said yes, and I have to believe Mr. Manconi. We trust him with, as our general manager of transportation, and I have to ask myself, given what we've heard today, do we have sufficient performance incentives, consequences for non-performance. I believe that we do. Do we have the absolute confidence in the entire process? No, absolutely we don't. We were not given any assurance of that today. But we have got to we've got to ask ourselves, what is the consequence of a no? How do we go from here? And I think we have staff, we hire staff to give us the very best advice. And in the end, that's the advice that I'm going to rely upon today. I'm very reluctantly supporting the recommendation in front of us today. I would have liked to have had a bit more time. There are a lot of questions, I believe, still unanswered. I think a lot of questions that were asked today. I hope they don't come back to haunt us. But I am going to reluctantly support the recommendations in front of us today, because I do believe that we cannot continue to build and continue to live in a sustainable city, a city where we need transit, where we need to be able to move about this city, where we need to be able to provide affordable housing at transit hubs so that people who need transit can move about. It's all very interconnected: climate, housing, transit, transportation. So today I'm going to reluctantly accept the recommendations in front of me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenney. Conseiller Fleury, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le maire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just as many colleagues, I was elected in 2010, and one of the first decisions of the council that was taken at that time was to move ahead with the phase one of the LRT, because that was the foundation of the house. And then we had to move to the second floor, and then we had a corridor between Blair and the other station, which would be the spine of the future of public transit in Ottawa. So it's difficult. It's a difficult construction site, and I've been through the changes in the street. We haven't opened yet, but we have to look at the big picture. And I think that this contract has provided us with protection. Since February 2018, there has been no fund transfer to the PPP. So PPPs are often criticized, but in this specific context, we have benefited from a contract which might have put us in even more vulnerable positions. And recently, we had a challenge regarding cars, rail cars, and Alstom has a good record. And they have sold the train cars and rail cars throughout Europe. And this is a very serious outfit. So we need now to bring the house to the second floor and then put a roof. And some people say we want a third floor. At least we have to start with the second floor before thinking about the third floor. And we need to stop the rain. So we need to build the roof. And year after year, we see that traffic can become untenable. And we saw on CBC how long commuting was becoming in Ottawa, how to get downtown in order to work, because we are the federal capital, we have a lot of civil servants. Now, let's not be focused only on the short term. We already started building the house. Let's make sure that we can build a roof. And I believe the City Council would be in a different position if we hadn't finished phase one. Now I'm confident that phase two will be easy. It would have been more of a slam dunk if we had needed 1.2 additional billion. This is a financial reality. So we had quite a number of objectives which created this requirement, and these are objectives which are legitimate and justified under many profiles. So this is not a perfect votation, but there's no perfect situation. So what is actual, which is real, is that we already built the foundation and the first floor, almost finished, but we want to finish our house, and this is why I agree with the investment for phase 2. I have a lot of respect for the team that carried us that far, and that there are some concerns regarding transparency, financial concerns, yes, but I believe that the city is in good hands, and I'm confident that the council can move forward with this kind of help, and this is why I'll be supporting the project. I'm not going there blindly. I do draw lessons from what happened regarding the coast overruns, but sometimes I think that regarding public transit and infrastructure investment are part and parcel of what we need for the city, because we will have more people being able to use public transit, and people will have easier conditions for the purpose of finding a dwelling. So we have to invest substantially. So I would encourage you to support the project. I see that there are weaknesses, but I think that we have built the first floor. Let's make sure that we can build the second floor and the roof. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor, and I can keep it brief. For the last 4 years, I've been working very closely with the residents of Kitchissippi Ward through a lot of really impactful decisions that had to be made around second stage alignment. We're going to have another phase of bus detours. We're going to be running bus detours practically in the front yard of some residents' homes. We have expropriated property in the ward and seen businesses shut down. We're moving a station into a park. And I want to thank particularly Mr. Swale this afternoon, who has put in the hours with me, with the community. I've seen him at work. We've trusted what he has said. We've changed the tone of consultation in light rail from what it was in stage 1. And this afternoon, we're being asked to finally approve stage 2. I don't have the information that gives me the confidence today that I'm making a decision based on having all the facts. And having all the facts has been something that I have prided myself on in the previous term of council. And today, for the first time, I'm going to be making a decision without, I think, all the facts, or being able to describe to residents exactly what the implications of my decision are. But I want to say to staff that it is a measure of the trust that I am putting in you as a result of 4 years of working with you on stage 2, that I'm willing to make that leap of faith this afternoon and vote in favor of stage 2. Let's build LRT. Let's build a sustainable city. Let's get that LRT out to the people who are waiting for it. Thank you, Mayor.
Right, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Councillor Leeper. Does anyone else wish to speak who has not spoken on the main item? Well, before we vote, I'd like to share my thoughts on this important issue. This is obviously an historic day for our city and certainly for our residents. And I encourage members of council to try to focus on what is before us and how it will affect our city literally for decades to come. Now, it should be obvious to everyone around the table that we face a tremendous test of leadership at council. Les décisions que nous prenons aujourd'hui sont
The decision we take today are a test of our leadership and of our willingness to maintain the good health of our community.
Support LRT and then vote against LRT. That makes no sense whatsoever. So we've had some challenges, obviously, with Phase 1, and this process, the procurement process, has taken longer than initially anticipated, largely in part due to a number of scope changes that were directed by Council itself. But let's take a step back and look at what's before us and what this means for the city over the long term. Prenons un moment pour réfléchir aux avantages.
Let's take the time to look at the long-term advantages.
Knows that the Confederation Line can never meet its full potential unless we build it farther east to Trim, we build it farther west to Moody and southwest to Algonquin College, and we significantly improve the reach and reliability of the Trillium Line into Riverside South and a spur line to the EY Centre and the airport. Now, each and every member of Council also acknowledges we can't get to Barrhaven and we can't get to Kanata-Stittsville without doing Stage 2. And I remain committed to to continue to work with you and upper levels of government to obtain funding for Stage 3. Nous devons aller de l'avant avec l'étape 2.
We must move forward with Phase 2 if one day we want to be able to bring LRT to Kanata, Stittsville, and Barrhaven.
Investment would create the single largest reduction in greenhouse gases in the city's history. It will also create over 27,500 person years of employment in the skilled trades, white-collar, blue-collar opportunities, extending the significant economic growth our city has experienced over the last 8 years. And Councillor El Shantiri reminded me that rural residents will also benefit as a result of the stations and park and rides and using it for their purposes when they come to work, for instance, in the downtown core. It will also encourage our residents, families, and businesses to continue investing with confidence in their future and in the future of our city. And it will bring better, more reliable transit to within 5 kilometers of 77% of our residents. So when you step back from it all, this is actually not a difficult decision to make at all. Some say we need more public consultation, but let's look at the facts. Almost everyone around the table campaigned on our commitment to move forward with Stage 2. And the city has led literally hundreds of consultation meetings on the Confederation Line and Stage 2. And residents in all parts of the city are demanding that we work to bring light rail to their community as soon as we can. Nos résidents à travers la ville veulent pouvoir.
Throughout the city, our residents want to benefit from the advantages of the LRT.
Then is, of course, the price tag with two rather straightforward explanations. Roughly 2/3 of the increase is a direct result of scope changes demanded by City Council, total of $700 million. And as I said at committee, it's the old carpenter's expression, you measure twice and saw once. And what I mean by that is that when we're in the field, let's do it right the first time so that we're not coming back and shutting down the O train longer because we didn't want to do the double railing at the time because the price was going to be higher than the original estimate. And let's also not continue to use the language that it's over budget. It was over the estimate. We set the budget, and the budget is being set today as a result of Council's decision to hopefully support this program. And the remaining third is an increase in the price of the project, which staff are saying is being witnessed in major transit procurements across the country. Rail operations are being built in many Canadian cities, and that's affecting labor costs and labor shortages, and it's driving the price up. So my view is that this is the time to be visionary and to be bold and to move forward with this particular project. Our finance staff, under the able leadership of our Treasurer and Deputy Treasurer, has told us that Stage 2 is affordable and that there are options to address the $500 million pressure over this 30-year planning horizon. Stage 2 procurement was made possible because we secured the highest level of funding in the City of Ottawa's history from the two other orders of government. So today I urge members of Council to focus on the long term. I believe that the staff recommendation before us is the right plan at the right time. We need to keep the momentum of LRT construction advancing in Ottawa, and I believe that the results for this procurement offer are real value for money, a competitive cost per kilometre of LRT, a realistic schedule, a more robust project agreement that will protect taxpayers. I also want to, in conclusion, thank our staff, including senior management, our Stage 2 procurement team, our Stage 2 office and planning team under the able leadership of Chris Swale, and all internal and external professionals associated with this procurement. I'm convinced that this process has been overseen by an exceptional team of dedicated, consummate professionals, and I'm convinced that they have followed council guidance with integrity and dedication, and they have delivered a very solid procurement for the future of our city. So it's time to vote. I encourage all members to move forward with this incredibly important city building project for generations to come. So on the report, yeas and nays, please.
Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli.
No.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor McKenney.
Yes.
Councillor Eglai.
Yes.
Councillor Luloff.
Yes.
Councillor Suds.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Meehan.
Yes.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Conseil Cloutier.
Oui.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
No.
Conseil Fleury.
Oui.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes. Yes.
Sorry. Councillor El Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Oui.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Deans.
No.
Conseil Blais.
Oui.
Mayor Watson.
Yes.
19 yeas, 3 nays.
So on item 17 is the long-range financial plan transit update that accompanies the report. Received? Received. Okay, thank you. We're now on to the City of Ottawa budget. So we have a motion by Councillor Hubley to move into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Hubley, please. Point of order, Councillor Deans.
10-minute recess.
Well, I'm not sure why. I think we should keep moving. Well, I think people can get up and do what they want. But people will start getting into interviews, and then we won't be finished. So let's move forward, Councillor Hubley. You have to take a break.
Waiting for my mic. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That City Council resolve into the Committee of the Whole pursuant to Section 52 and 53 of the Procedure Bylaw.
Yes. Well, Councillor, I know members of Council want to do media interviews, but we are wanting to... Okay, well,
We're here to
then...
work or have, do media?
All right, does anyone wish to adjourn? Who wants to keep moving forward? Adjourn. And, sorry? Oh, no, recess. Who wants to recess? Show of hands. Adjourn. Budget is amended, carried. Who wants to continue moving on? Let's do a quick straw poll. Okay, so majority wants us to keep going. So, Councillor Hubley, you've moved your motion? Committee of the Whole?
You want me to say it again?
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, that the Committee of the Whole, that City Council resolve to move into the Committee of the Whole pursuant to Section 52 and 53 of the Procedure Bylaw, Mr. Mayor.
On the motion, carried. So Councillor Dudas has the roadmap motion for consideration, seconded by Councillor Luloff. So if you would like to read that, Councillor, right up to the after the be it further resolved.
Okay. Be it resolved that the City Council, as Committee of the Whole, receive and consider the draft 2019 operating and capital budgets as recommended by the Committee of Adjustment, Crime Prevention Ottawa, the Ottawa Police Services Board, the Ottawa Public Library Board, the Ottawa Board of Health, and by the Standing Committees, Transit Commission, and Information Technology Subcommittee, and the 2019 rate-supported operating and capital budgets as recommended by the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water, and Waste Management, as listed listed in the council agenda and incorporating all amended budget books and pages, including the amended Ottawa Police Services Board budget, amended pages 23 to 25B and 115 to 199B of the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management rate-supported budget book, additional pages 44A, 44B, and 44C of the Finance and Economic Development Committee budget book, and amended pages 21 and 22 of the Planning Committee budget book.
Okay. Thank you very much. Just a reminder to members of council, Councillor Luloff on the LRT did issue this direction to staff that the Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development Departments modify the secondary plan for Place d'Orleans to start in 2019 to capture the Eastern Stage 2 LRT corridor potential transit-oriented development sites as one coordinated plan. So that's gone off. Okay, so we're going to go. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council A approve the 2019 draft operating budget for the Committee of Adjustment. We have a technical amendment. Oh, I'm sorry, if anyone has any motions that have not already been submitted, if they could submit them now. So the technical amendment is the cost estimates. Councillor Harder, please, seconded by Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it is as you said, and whereas the Committee of Adjustment user fee schedule included an effective date of March 7th and in 2019, and the other planning application fees contained in the Planning Committee budget have an effective date of April 1st, 2019. And whereas in order to avoid confusion for the public and minimize clerical and administrative inefficiencies, it would be preferable to have these fee changes take effect at the same date. And so we're asking that that effective date be April the 1st, 2019.
Okay, so Councillor Harder, that's your motion.
Right.
On the motion? Carried. Councillor Tierney has a technical amendment.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll just dispense with the whereases and get right to it. It's just related to some of the numbers that were in the roadmap motion. So therefore, it be resolved that Finance and Economic Development recommendation, item number 4 of the roadmap motion, be amended to replace the 395,000 with 400,000.
Okay, on the motion, carried. Okay, on the draft operating budget for the Committee of Adjustment as amended, carried. Approve the 2019 draft operating budget for Crime Prevention Ottawa, carried. Approve the Ottawa Police Services draft operating and capital budget as recommended by and as amended by the Ottawa Police Services Board on February 25th, 2019 by the following, and there's a list under item A. Item 4 is a technical amendment that Councillor Tierney just brought forward, and then it stops at 5. Councillor Fleury and Councillor Brockington on the police budget. And I know the Chief is here. This is his last budget, and Deborah Fraser, her last budget, so we thank you both very much for your service, and we're sorry we didn't do your item first.
Monsieur le maire, moi, c'est pas une question, c'est une question.
Well, it's not a question, it's a question for the clerk.
I'd like to recognize the chair and the vice chair for their role in this year's budget and relating to the Ottawa Police Services. Council had indicated a very clear direction, and certainly I want to recognize their work on that. I will be dissenting on a small portion of the budget, which is specific to community policing, which in my mind needs to be more a fundamental shift. It's not against, I think, you know, I'm happy with the budget overall, but certainly I'm dissenting on that component to send a message that we really need to do a little more. So maybe the clerk can inform me as to which section that applies.
Do you not know what section it is you want to dissent?
Page 91.
Okay, but you should tell us which section you want to dissent on.
Page 91, community services.
Okay, so got that. And also Keith Eglai, thank you as well. You were helpful in the budget process. So is anyone else, Councillor Brockington, are the buttons not working? Oh, there we go. Councillor Brockington, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Usually every year I have, lengthy comments on this budget. In the interest of time, I'm not going to get into that today, but I do want to ask for some clarification to the chief with respect to one of the areas that they found some cost savings. Again, they were directed to go back and shave some money off of their budget. And one of them is a reduction in the overtime expenses. On the page before us, $300,000. My question is this: given that the OPS has struggled in budgets past keeping within the budget, you've generally gone well over budget on your overtime costs. How is a reduction in this area realistically going to be achieved in 2019?
Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. The original plan was to actually increase the budget by $600,000 in overtime. Council may remember that last year we did increase the budget for overtime substantially, and we wanted to continue moving down a path to right-size that budget. Because of the target we had to achieve, we're cutting that to $300,000 as opposed to $600,000 increase. Certainly overtime is a function of the business that we're in, and we've seen this year so far, as far as our response to a homicide investigation and other events that have taken place, that overtime is a challenge for us. But we're confident that with that target, we should be able to come with the budget on the overtime.
What non-emergency or non-critical demands do you have with respect to overtime? Obviously, if there's a homicide, if there's critical events, you absolutely have to deploy resources to that. But how much flexibility do you actually have in deciding whether or not overtime is to be issued?
The majority of the overtime that we are spending is as a result of major incidents that are taking place. Certainly, we've put additional measures in place to mitigate non-emergency overtime, officers having to stay late to fulfill reports, trying to manage from a supervisor perspective, putting measures in place. Another area that we've actually mitigated some of the challenges were around our front desk services, where we civilianized that. We're adding 7 casual pools in order to mitigate overtime that was being expended in that area.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Boddington. Councillor El-Shantiri, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief and Director General. Director General, we worked with you in the past about the IT roadmap, and I see this is one of your largest capital items for many years to come. Now, I don't want to vote for, or I'm going to vote for it. I don't want to vote against it, but I need a commitment from you folks that mean you will not make any decision on the IT roadmap without consultation with city staff, because we learned the city also doing something similar, so we don't want to see duplication, and that could be cost saving for the police, and that money, instead of being spent, can go and put more boots on the ground. So I need a commitment, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure how could that tie up. I know we cannot put a motion here to direct a certain, but I would like to have a commitment. There will be no decision made on IT roadmap without consultation with the city treasurer and staff.
Mr. Mayor, you do have our commitment, and in fact, we have already demonstrated that we are working with the city to ensure that the advances that we are making in technology are parallel to those that the city is doing, using SAP, using our HR systems, transferring financial responsibilities and payroll to the city, and that type of work will continue. We also have a commitment around moving forward with back office transformation in parallel and working with the city to ensure that we can maximize efficiencies and maximize the work that is taking place between the two police services, the police service and the city.
Thank you, Chief. I'm glad you agree, but actually in 3 months you will not be here, neither the Director General, so I want to make sure a new leadership doesn't come in and really turn around the whole process. So I want to make sure that we have a safeguard around this process. That's what I'm looking for.
Mr. Mayor, there was a motion put before the Police Services Board that speaks specifically to that, that the staff be directed to continue to work with the City of Ottawa to identify efficiencies and savings from the transfer of back office functions to the city and report back to the progress of those discussions in the second quarter of 2019. So it is on the board agenda, and I'm sure that our new chair will hold us to that.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres questions pour la police?
Other questions for the police?
Oh, thank you very much. So item 3 carried. Item 4 is amended, carried. Dissent on that one section. Item number 5 is approve the 2019 Ottawa Public Library Board draft operating and capital budgets as recommended by the OPL. Any questions or comments on OPL and what a great job the chair is doing? Carried. Item 6, approve the 2019 Ottawa Board of Health draft operating budget as recommended by the city's Ottawa Board of Health. And Councillor McKenney is declaring an interest on item B. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions sur le département de santé?
Questions on the health department?
Carried. 6B, note Councillor McKenney's declaration of interest. Carried. Item C, 2019 health operating budget. Carried. Item 7, approve the 2019 draft operating and capital budgets as recommended by the Standing Committee of Council, Transit Commission and Information Technology Subcommittee as follows. A, the ARAC committee portion of the 2019 draft operating capital budget. Carried. B, the audit committee portion of the 2019 draft operating budget. Sorry? What would you, do you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question is for Auditor General. So wait for him to get down.
Here he comes.
Mr. Mayor. Sir. Okay, the first one may be a bit of a lob question, but the question is, last year you underspent your budget by 3%, and this year the budget has you getting an additional 3%. So I'm wondering why you need the 3% if you were already underspending by 3%.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, it's a good question. One of the issues that poses it's the good news and the bad news is every year, not knowing whether or not we will have an urgent request to investigate an issue, I have to make sure that we leave a certain amount of money, and I generally try to keep about $40,000 to $50,000 for that purpose, so that I have the funds to take on an emergency investigation without going over budget. And this year, which means that every year you're going to see that I'm going to be between $30,000 and $60,000 under. And this year we also had an individual who went away on a family leave, so that explains the differential.
Okay. Second question. Well, you probably knew I was going to ask this because I asked it last year and said I would ask it this year. And it relates to when we created the Office of Auditor General, one of the central reasons was to find savings in the organization, both transactional savings and structural savings within the organization. And I know when I was chair of audit during that period, we identified between $50 and $70 million of savings, which management then, and they were different people as well, accepted. And what I asked you last year was what are the savings that have been identified this time? I'm not sure where they would appear or when they'll appear, but if you could answer that.
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, I'm glad you've asked the question again, because it once again allows me to provide the answer that I've provided every year.
The reason I ask questions is to provide an opportunity for an answer.
Absolutely, and I will give the answer that my answer will be consistent with the past. When I came into this office, I noticed you were quite correct. There were savings that were identified in audits, but one of the biggest issues was that those savings were never harvested. And that meant that a significant amount of audit resources were dedicated to identifying savings that were never harvested out of the budget. And the decision that I took, and I discussed it I've discussed it at Audit Committee and Council since then, is that we continue to identify savings, identify the areas in our audits where management can find savings, but we don't invest the limited audit resources in quantifying those savings, and we leave that to management. You'll see in the audits that we've prepared in the 5 years that I've been here, the areas where we have identified savings that could be determined by management, and then those additional resources could either be harvested through a budget reduction, or they could be used to introduce additional programs that management wishes to offer. But we left that decision to management, but we still look for savings. But audit is, the function of audit is far bigger than savings. That doesn't mean that we're going to ignore them, and we still provide them in every audit that we do.
Okay, because in the past, when savings were identified, management has virtually always said they concurred with the findings, and we're going to proceed on that basis. But I think what you're telling me is we would need motions to take that savings number, whatever it is in each section, out of the budget in order for it to be reflected. Is that correct, or how would it go?
That might be a start, but there are certainly the main function of audit is not to find savings. In reality, under the Municipal Act, the Office of the Auditor General is to help council hold themselves and management accountable for how they spend money. And that's more than just savings. It's things like making sure that staff are carrying out the functions that they are supposed to be carrying out, that staff are carrying out the directions of council, that staff are doing what council thinks they're doing, and that goes beyond savings. That doesn't mean that we don't look for efficiencies. We certainly do.
Yeah, because there are two ways of finding efficiencies. One is the structural design of departments, and the other is how they function, right? And do you do both of those now, or did you do both of those leading up to this budget?
We continue to look for savings in any way that they can be determined, whether it's through looking at the processes that are followed in everything from the accounts payable process to the steps that are taken in procurement, to how staff manage their contracts. And when we present to Audit Committee, we talk about the processes. We talk about the areas where improvements can be found. Yes.
So that's yes. And then in terms of when will we find out a number that we could attach to savings you may have identified in the past year?
Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor, I think the audit literature is replete with plenty of examples of the value of the audit function. Forget the fact that it's a good corporate practice to have an audit function. But traditionally, money spent on audit returns anywhere from $7 to $11 for every dollar that is spent in audit. So we already know that audit by itself provides a return on that investment, and we will continue to look for savings. We will not invest the limited audit resources in quantifying those savings just for the sake of putting a number on a page.
Okay. All right, then I guess the third thing would be one of the functions when you set the work plan, one of the factors is risk, right? And so about a decade ago, we had an audit done on Light Rail Phase 1, and it indicated that we should have processes in place to ensure council has enough time and information next time to deal with a project like this. And it didn't happen this time. Will you be checking into how it can be altered or tweaked to make sure it does happen in the future?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, through you to the councillor. I've talked numerous times about the work that we've done on light rail, and you're correct. The councillor is correct when he says that risk is plays a significant role in the projects that we add to our audit work plan, and that's why we've had 3 LRT projects added to a work plan so far. We looked at the change management process, where we were looking at the process where on one day the population of the City of Ottawa comes home from work on a primarily bus-operated service. And the next day, they go to work on a combination bus light rail. The big risk, of course, was that they turn the switch and it doesn't work. We completed that audit, and we found that the planning that was in place was well done. In fact, it's part of the process that ensures that the city hasn't taken over light rail when it isn't ready. So that was the most significant risk. We've done that work. The next most significant risk that we saw was the regulatory framework around the rail network. The City of Ottawa was the first municipality in Canada to be given the authority over the regulation of the rail network. In our mind, for reasons of safety and security, we saw that as the second largest risk. We've done that audit. The third audit that we are in the middle of right now, we are looking at the property acquisitions in relation to light rail. And I'm happy to say that we're coming forward at the end of this month with another planned audit in relation to light rail. And certainly the initial project that was the initial audit that was done in relation to early light rail, that was followed up, and there were some recommendations that management implemented, and we will be looking at aspects of this. Of the launch of Light Rail 1 and Light Rail 2, and we will incorporate those into our planning process.
Okay. And on the way things at council on major projects like this, so that was the subject of the 2009, or part of the 2009 audit. Could you review that and see if there are any recommendations you could make to improve the situation so we don't get in a situation where we're jammed again like we were?
So, Councillor, we're on the budget of the Auditor General. This is something that should be raised at Audit Committee, getting into his work plan. So do you have a question on his budget? I know you started off with the budget, but we're going down another slope that should be dealt with at the committee.
Would we need to add money to your budget to make that happen?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to the councillor. Well asked. Every year, at the current time, our budget is adequate to perform the work that is on our work plan, and we will go through the same risk analysis process that we've gone through in the past. So, as I indicated, we will take that into consideration.
Thank you. So on the Audit Committee portion of the 2019 draft operating budget, carried. Item C, CPS portion of the 2019 draft operating capital budget. Councillor Deans, she can step back from the chair. No, this is a conflict of interest. Okay, so we have one Children's Services operating resource requirement as follows, A and B. Do you have questions on that, Councillor Fleury? So on those two, carried. Item 2, Councillor McKenney can step away from the table. Housing Services operating resource requirement, page 63, as follows, A, B, C, D. Is that it, Councillor Fleury? Yes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to go back to some of the housing questions from committee, and a few questions we weren't able to ask properly here. So, Janice, on page 57, specifically for the housing group, there's a reduction of 336,000, and then on page 63, the overall housing program is dropping $1 million. So, could you maybe comment both of those budget lines?
So, Mr. Mayor, every year we receive instruction from the province to provide certain subsidies to social housing providers. It's legislated and it's based on a set of indices. So this year, based on the indices that they provided to us, it ends up being the subsidies we have to provide to the social housing providers ends up being $1.2 million less than required. So it's not that there's been a reduction, it's those are the actual subsidies that have to be granted to the social housing providers based on instruction and legislate from the province.
Okay. And then my follow-up question is for members of committee, if you would have received an email, a series of emails from Janice and I about the Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative that went over the last 5 years of spending specifically for shelters. For those of you who don't have it in front of you, I'll give you a quick snapshot. In 2013, we were at $21.7 million. There's been a constant growth, and last year in 2018, we were at around 30 million, of which additional dollars of around $4.6 million came directly from the city's portion. So, Janice, a question to you relating to this. How do we get out of it? How do we not constantly see a growth? I mean, we have the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. We have the $15 million capital investment that both Councillor McKinney and I were pushing for. How do we get to see less operational pressure relating to that specific fund?
Mr. Mayor, so when we implemented the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, we started to see a decrease over 2 years, so our strategies were working. In the last 2 years, as noted in other cities across Canada, we've seen a significant increase in demand. In addition to that, we've seen a very low vacancy rate. We've also seen very high rents in Ottawa. We've also seen a length of stay increase, so it means the people that are in shelters are staying longer, and more people are requiring shelter, which means the situation is compounded. We have taken a number of actions over the last year. We're practicing diversion. We're doing more outreach to landlords for rent supplements. We've converted some of our capital into housing options, and the list goes on. The fact of the matter is that what's contributing to the demand in the City of Ottawa is not only those who are destabilizing locally, but it's also refugees, and we have the irregular border crossing as well, which is new, which has contributed to the significant and sustained increase over the last 2 years. So I think the step of the $15 million that was discussed and approved at planning is a good step, and we wait for additional funding from the federal and provincial dollars to complement that so that we can start building new affordable housing, using rent supplements and housing allowances, which are also permitted under the federal and provincial dollars that we will be receiving.
If you're sharing with us that obviously the growth portion of it in the last 2 years has been families. We know that we don't have a lot of capacity for families outside of the YMCA and the old Ford Avenue shelter. Is there an economic scenario where you could see yourself embarking in month-to-month agreements with landlords to get away from temporary accommodations, but then trying to find cost savings and find more efficiencies that way?
Mr. Mayor, of course, more rent supplements and housing allowances and building new affordable housing is the way to go. We do need a budget to do that because at this point we need our shelter portion to respond to people. Otherwise, we will find families who are basically homeless and on the street and living in vehicles and so on and so forth. So we do need this funding right now in the emergency shelter budget in order to respond to the needs, so we're not turning people away. And of course, any additional investment, like the $15 million, is going to assist us with reducing those numbers over time.
Okay. Just on my final point, Mr. Mayor, so I won't be supportive that part of the budget. I expressed my concerns relating to continued increases and the need to find more of a sustainable reduction, because we keep operationalizing that pressure. There are items that are coming to CPS committee that are, the snapshot that last council requested, that it be the snapshot of homelessness, that it be some of the elements. So I'll use that form to bring about the change that I'm looking for. But certainly, I feel that more sustained investments and a variety of agreements need to be put in place. Simply said, if we're willing to spend $1 operationally on pressures for shelter, we should spend that same $1 in capital. So that's why I'll be dissenting on that.
Okay, so that would be IIA?
728.
728, Community Homelessness Prevention Initiative. Okay, so a dissent by Councillor Fleury. Other questions on the item 7C? Carried. Community and Protective Services Draft Capital Budget, Councillor Deans. Item A, Child Care Capital Budget 81 of CPSC Budget Book. Carried. Yes, so carried all of CPS. And B, the remaining 2019 CPS capital budget. Carried. Item D, the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Waste Management tax supported portion of the 2019 drafted operating capital budget. Councillor McKenney has a motion seconded by Councillor Brockington with respect to GHGs. You'd have to remove the last sentence because you can't use the tax stabilization fund, but your portion with respect to hydro is in order. So we'll remove the last one. Councillor, would you like to speak to it, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will remove that last sentence. This is something that was when we were debating in the Standing Committee on Environmental Protection, Water and Wastewater, it became evident that we weren't going to have the money to invest in a staff or a FTE to look at annual reporting out of our community greenhouse gases. And this is something that the community has been very concerned about. We've heard from them, and we did miss several of our targets in the last term. I did have worked with the chair of the committee as well as staff to approve to look for an allocation of $60,000, which would help us with funding to complete an annual both community and corporate GHG inventory. So I can read out the full motion if you need that.
I think, does everyone have it on the screen?
Does everybody have it?
Maybe just the last.
Okay, so the last, so therefore be it resolved that council approve the allocation of $60,000 of new funding to complete annual community and corporate GHG inventories, with the first inventory being completed by the end of Q4 2019, with the financial requirement coming from the dividends from Hydro Ottawa. And again, this is to ensure that we are tracking how we're doing towards our greenhouse gases, the reduction in our greenhouse gases, and how we are moving forward on our energy evolution, to inform how we move forward and either stay the course or make changes on our energy evolution to ensure that we are being the most sustainable city possible.
Councillor Brockington on the motion you're seconding.
Yeas and nays?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very briefly, I wanted to underscore the importance of measurement, and that if we want to have a true sense of the impact of decisions that we're making as a city, the various initiatives that we are approving to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, you need to measure it. There needs to be a mechanism to do that. And I've certainly heard loud and clear through numerous environmental groups and people in my ward about having an annual base. And I've worked with Councillor McKenney to put this motion forward. It's not paid through the property tax base. Should there be additional dividends received through hydro, that would be paid in that way. So I think this is a very prudent way to pay for the plan or the initiative, and I definitely think the city needs to have an annual measurement done to gauge whether or not the initiatives that we've sponsored are effective. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Blais on the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just from a process perspective, which of our fine general managers over there will end up being responsible for this one?
For you, Mr. Mayor, that is part of our service.
Wonderful. And you're supportive of this motion?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we certainly heard the same concerns raised with stakeholder groups continually throughout the process, and this work will be done. It'll be done, just to clarify, through a consulting contract, because we do not have those as in-house resources, but we will do it.
Sure. And so what is a community GHG inventory? Like at how far down are you going?
So, Mr. Mayor, right now we report on corporate emissions on a regular basis. We committed last year to report on those annually, and that's what this corporation of the City of Ottawa generates and through all of our operations. This is a community-wide estimate based on information we get from the various energy providers.
I understand that, but is community the City of Ottawa, or is it CARP and Navan and Avalon?
It's a city-wide. We basically add up all of the energy used in the city and derive what the carbon footprint of that energy use is.
Sure, that's perfect. Thank you.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question actually to the treasurer. We say the 60,000 of new fund come from the endowment from hydro. Can you explain to me? I thought we are just to receive, is 20,000 now, the interest on that, sorry, 20 million? And
it's 20 million, and that's what the dividend policy is. They pay 60% of their net income, and if it's up to, if it's greater than 20 million, and as a base, it's 20 million. So we are assured of getting $20 million. They will declare their dividend probably later this month, early next month. They have been above it for the last couple of years. I anticipate they'll be slightly above it in 2019.
So you feel comfortable dealing with that 60,000?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Moffat, please.
Just wanted to add that at committee, we approved a motion moved by Councillor Eglai that I worked on that would take any dividend. So like we did last term of council, or last term of council, with the dividend going to some to energy evolution, others to potholes. We did the motion puts the whole 100% of any surplus to energy evolution. This motion essentially, and I think I'm clear on this, would act as almost like a baseline for, you'd start with this, and then you'd move the rest to use this as the baseline for how to spend the rest, working with staff through energy evolution.
Mr. Mayor, that's exactly how we anticipate operationalizing this.
Okay. So on the motion by Councillor McKenney and Brockington as amended, carried. Councillor McKenney and Leeper have a motion with respect to urban forest management plan, and they've identified a source from vacant positions. Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, again, this is with respect to the city's new urban forest management plan that we approved in 2017. Many aspects of it have been pushed off further than we expected, and but we do recognize the the critical importance of, enforcing tree protection under our city's tree bylaws. We're losing trees, especially in the inner urban core. Actually, one of my colleagues, chair of planning committee, came to me the other day and said she was driving through my ward and she found it a bit ugly. Now, it was a gray day, and she found, in a good way, yeah. But, a lot of what contributes to a healthy, attractive, a neighborhood anywhere in the city is its tree canopy. And almost weekly, I get somebody coming to me and giving me a very good reason to cut down 1 or 2 trees in the downtown. So this really is just to move forward on bylaw enforcement so that we have a dedicated employee, dedicated officer who will be able to identify where trees could be lost and to provide that extra protection.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harder. The motion? That's correct, on the trees.
To Councillor McKenney's motion. So further to our conversation, you should know that one of the things that Ms. Sneddon and I have talked about after speaking to some of the developers that work within your area, Councillor Leeper's area, where the developer is trying very hard to keep trees as well. And I think that you know about this, Jeff. The process is kind of like inverted so that it's too late that tree comes up as a situation. And so just so you know, we talked about this yesterday and expect more to be for. I didn't have a chance to tell you. That's okay. Leanne and I are talking about it. And so anyways, it all ties in together, but clearly it's important. So I'm going to be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Conseiller Fleury.
Just want to confirm, I'm supportive of the motion, but will this be in bylaw services? Because in my mind, it's very different if it's a forestry inspector versus bylaw services. I just want to clarify.
Mayor, we're still having discussions in the department. Bylaw already enforces part of this, but often we need expertise from some of the forestry people. So just a question, how can we be most effective and be successful when we bring files forward to court? So we're going to ensure that we have a better harmonization. So that question likely will be a combination of both, actually.
So my 2 cents, if the mover is comfortable, would be that the resource be in bylaw services.
Well, I think we'll allow staff to determine that. I think that's getting into the weeds. Yeah, and we've approved the CPS budget. Okay, so on Standing Committee on Environment Protection, Water and Waste Management as amended. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I thought we did. Yeah, carried. And the amendment and the report, item D, as amended with the 2 motions. Carried, adopté. Item E, Transportation Committee portion of the 2019 draft operating and capital budget. Councillor Fleury has a motion, seconded by myself. This is revenue coming into the city.
Yes, merci, Monsieur le Maire. C'est une motion qui vient des employés puis qui vient.
This motion comes from the staff and from the committee, pages 23 and 24, and the user's fee were 0%. So are we really reflecting the increase of cost for the city, which was $19,000? So the percentage has been brought up to 2% in order to reflect our costs, the $19,000, and that will be made available in order to balance the city budget.
Councillor Menard, do you need a motion on the bike rack issue, or are you going to deal with staff? We get Councillor Menard's mic.
No, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to talk with staff about it. They're supportive, and we'll deal with that at committee. So,
okay, thank you. Any other motions on transportation? No. On the on item E as amended, carried. Or, sorry, Councillor Shirelli on transportation.
Okay, on the winter operations, is he here? Yes, okay. Are you forecasting that we will, very simply, that we're going to be over budget on winter ops budget, on snow clearing?
Mr. Mayor, we will find that out at our Q1 when we report out at Q1, the city treasurer. But suffice to say, given that the crews, the men and women of the department have been going 24/7 through the weekends, et cetera, we'll be coming out of the first part of the winter with a calendarized probably deficit. I can't tell you how much it is at this point.
Okay, so today or Friday are the days that we're going to pass this budget. Why would we pass one knowing that we're going to be over budget?
Mr. Mayor, even though the Road Services branch runs a deficit, and they've run a deficit, I think, all but 2 or 3 years in the last 10 years. The department, many years, comes out without a deficit, and I will remind the councillor that we do have the reserve funds to dip into, and over the last 10 years, I believe we've dipped into the reserve fund once. So the city as a whole.
Well, that's understandable when you're passing the budget before the money is spent, but now it's spent. We already know that it's probably not enough.
Mr. Mayor, we'll know at the end of the year. We still have November and December.
I know. It won't get less, right?
No, as I mentioned, Mr. Mayor, it was the calendarized budget.
I know.
But we have budget in November, December. At the end of the year, if we have a good November, December, then, you know, we may or may not be in a deficit position for the Road Services branch.
But that hasn't worked out over the last 10 years, maybe twice, right?
Mr. Mayor, I can't predict the weather, so I'm not sure where we'll end up at the end of the year.
Yeah. Well, you actually can predict the average weather, though.
That's correct. I will also say that there's growth. There is growth in the 2019 budget, so that'll give us room over and above last year.
All right.
Okay, Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize, I missed the Transportation Committee meeting. I was away. I would be remiss, though, not to ask maybe for a brief recap of the the discussion around sidewalk clearing. I caught a few tweets. I think there was some significant discussion around it. It's something we have to fix. How are we, and obviously I have not had time to put together motions and get council support for putting more money into sidewalk plowing. I don't know if more money would even fix the problem. What is the approach to making sure that our sidewalks are much better cleared in years moving forward before I support the transportation budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the staff will be reviewing the maintenance quality standards for sidewalks and potentially other aspects of our winter operations. To be honest, although we are trying new technologies, we're trying different ways to break up the ice. We've got some attachments. I'm sure you've heard about them, Councillor. But to be honest, throwing more money at a winter like this winter won't solve the problem. What will solve the problem is getting away from snowpack conditions on some of our lower class sidewalks and our residential roads. We will look at that. But I can say that that'll probably come at a pretty big premium.
Yeah, and that's that's what I'm hoping to hear is, if we do require expenditures, is it on the capital side, is it on staff side? And I have also gotten some great feedback already on the ice crusher. We need a new name for that. It's got to be an awesome name. I'm not sure we've arrived at it yet. So what is the timeline from a review of the winter maintenance quality standards to some kind of a budget recommendation from staff?
Mayor, what staff's proposing at this point is to put in a pressure, and we haven't done the work to determine how big the pressure would be for the 2020 budget deliberations, but that would cover off whatever consulting dollars we need, whatever staff we might need to second. I would imagine a review of this scope, which hasn't been done since 2003, would take up to 12 to 18 months, and then we would go forward with a report to council. Council would get to deliberate over what options they would like to see, and then we would go forward with a budget pressure probably in 2022, 2023.
So that's some distance away. Is there not, can you use more money in the meantime? If we gave you more money to throw at sidewalks, would it help?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think, I mean, this winter's been exceptional, and the amount of weather, and in fact, I think the Environment Canada gave us the gold medal for the winter across the country. But this winter has been exceptional. We do have the latitude, once we wrap up with the ice breaking technology, we do have the latitude to leverage our fleet replacement program to get more of those units. There is some discretionary capital as well. So prior to doing anything on the maintenance standards, there's certainly things that the department can do without having to further increase the budget.
Do you need to clear the snowbanks earlier or more frequently to address some of the sidewalk issues? And is that a budget pressure that you have right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we've cleared probably, I think this year we'll be coming in, again, over the last 10 years, we'll be coming in third, maybe second largest amount of snow to be cleared. So I don't know if, and we tapped out all the contractors' trucks, we tapped out all the contractors' equipment. It does help where you have a sidewalk against a curb, and obviously it increases the drainage. But in often cases, you've got a boulevard between the sidewalk and the curb, followed by the lawn. It won't help in that case. So, and most of those cases where we see this kind of problem, we do remove the snow.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Harder, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I was concerned when I heard that it would take you up to 18 months for such a study. I understand how comprehensive it is, but, you know, I would think that there'd be some pilots that we could do, and we have been doing pilots. Several years ago, we started in Barrhaven with you know, our worst roads, most difficult to maintain. We asked the people to work with us and just have parking on one side of the road. But one of the things really disadvantages, and I've the bourbon basher is what we want to call that ice thing that hasn't come out to suburbia. Jeff, the bourbon basher, we're going to call it. Okay, bourbon basher, like it's in suburban, you know, the forgotten place. Anyway. So in that way, we might get it out there. But you know that we've had many conversations, and the policy that we have does not work in general across the city. It's one policy for all. But the very residential roads, which are the last on the list, which sometimes, if there's no time and there's no equipment, never get done, are where a vast majority of our children walk to school. In suburbia, we don't have sidewalks. The best thing you can give us in the new areas, rather than sidewalks with that little boulevard and then et cetera, which also makes laneways extremely small, the better thing you could give us would be MUPs and all, and this would be, you know, through the work that we do in planning, for example, to give us the multi-use pathways so that they're easier for your team to maintain. But when you have the roads that are connected for all of our kids, you walk to 27 schools just in Barrhaven, and they're walking on places where we may never plow, that's a real problem. And I can't wait for 18 months from whenever you start. So I would like to suggest that you consider where we can identify opportunities to try something different. So for example, the Moody Yard serves Councillor Meehan, serves myself, serves Councillor Eglai, even a little bit of Councillor Brockington, maybe more than that. The Manotick one serves Councillor Meehan, myself and Stonebridge, Half Moon Bay, Councillor Moffat, that we look at a couple of these large places and see what we can do with the equipment we have there to change the way we're doing it. Because the protocols that we do do not work in suburban communities. They just don't. And if the goal is, and I'm sure it is, about making people as safe as we possibly can with the budget we have, definitely we have to go forward and move that residential street up to the top, especially in proximity where kids are all walking to school. So I would like you to have that consideration and do that in advance. We do some things that that haven't been part of a policy, and And actually, we do it often enough, and it gives us a good reading on whether or not it's worthwhile and is a good way to put forward. But as far as putting more money into your budget, I agree with you. You know what? I don't want to tie up $100 million instead of $70 million, which we've climbed up to this year, just in case the weather's awful. We know that as a municipality, we're not allowed to have a deficit at the end of the year. It's against the law. So we always manage with that throughout all of our various departments. It has been an incredibly difficult year, and absolutely. And, you know, people are winter wary. They certainly are. But anyway, thank you to you and your staff for how you've tried to keep ahead of it. I just think that this coming winter, if we look at a couple of pilots, and I bet you Councillor Meehan and I would be very willing to throw up a couple of between our areas out of one of your yards, let's see what the difference is then. Because as you know, in the newest area, in Half Moon Bay, the cost for you to do snow work is 9 times as much as it is in the Mary Honeywell, Elizabeth Ann, St. Elizabeth Ann neighborhoods in Barrhaven. 9 times as much, and you cannot operate without taking snow away. So it really is, it's a unique situation, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Meehan on the transportation budget.
Yeah, I would very much support Councillor Harder's suggestion there. We have to find different ways of tackling the snow, especially in suburbia, because the way we're building is making it really challenging. So, yeah, I look forward to that. I guess my question, Mr. Wiley, is why do we have to study sidewalk clearing standards? And how much does that cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and just to refresh, in 2003, we came up with a set of standards that were adopted by council, and that's what we're resourced to do. So the sorts of things we'd be exploring are things, just as Councillor Harder mentioned, do we put a higher priority around schools, for instance, and especially when there's no sidewalks, residential roads around schools, maybe they get a higher priority. Do we put a higher priority and emphasis on residential sidewalks, where right now it's a snowpack condition? Do they become a bare condition? All these nuances, and I should say that we do full consultation as we did back in 2003 across the city. All these nuances are going to change the deployment. They're going to change the equipment required, the staffing required, and of course it'll change the financial situation.
And how much does a study like that cost?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe the department's looking at a rough estimate of around $200,000 to $300,000, something that nature, including public consultation and a project manager.
I can just hear folks who are listening to this and saying, just put that money into the clearing. Just get out there. I mean, I know that you guys have been out there, and I realize around the clock, but I think that they're going to roll their eyes and throw up their hands if they hear we're doing a study on sidewalk clearing. They just want those money to go into doing the job. That's just how I feel about it. Anyway, thank you.
Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all your work. Yes, it's been a heck of a winter. It's been kind of a baptism by fire for new councillors as we tackle those calls and those emails and the frustration out there. I know your team is doing the best it can, and I applaud them. One of the things that I've put forward at the Transportation Committee, I'm not a member, but thank you to Councillor Lula for presenting it, is to look at the way we handle the standards. And if I can put my hat on as the liaison on women's issues and gender equity, I think there's a lot to do with it in terms of how we look at the standards. As you've said, we haven't updated them in 16 years, and a lot has changed, climate change being the biggest one. We're looking at a lot of shifts, and a lot of the frustrations we're working with is the freeze-thaw. That's becoming more common, and we're getting some pretty wicked weather. But as well, we're looking at the fact that we just approved an over $4 billion LRT system, and people need to walk to that. So we need to look at those standards very, very carefully, because this is the priority now. If we're going to talk about doing snow clearing, the sidewalks are more of a priority. Bikes are going to be more of a priority. Roads are still there, but if we clear them, they will come. And I believe that we will see more people using sidewalks if we clear them, especially when they're on routes to a transit station or just to bus stops that are well used. These are very, very important. So I hope that that will be considered, because I suspect you will be going over budget because it's been a heck of a year. And of course, we've still got November, December to look forward to. But I just wanted to throw in there that there are studies out there about on gender issues related to snow clearing. It does affect it. And I just wanted your comment on that. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my team and Mr. Manconi's team has already started that work, how to coordinate plowing and removal around the LRT stations once they open. So that work's already been started, and it'll be ready in time for next winter when the trains are running.
Thank you. And also to schools as well. And we have to look at other routes, like just to keep people in the community as well, because if we expect people to walk more to do their errands or whatever, we need sidewalks cleared. I'm hearing a lot from people who would like to continue to walk year-round, but that is a big problem, particularly ice. I think it's actually more ice than snow. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so on the Transportation Committee, on Councillor Fleury's motion, we have to add at the end as attached in the fee charts. I think the Treasurer told us. So on that, carried. On the committee report as amended, carried. Dissent by Councillor Shirelli, he wants no snow removal, okay. Dissent by Councillor Menard. You want less snow removal? What's that? All right, so item G, Planning Committee portion of the 2019 draft operating capital budget is amended to increase the transfers, grants, financial charges line of the affordable housing budget by $2 million as recommended by FEDCO. Carried. Item H, the Transit Commission portion of the 2019 operating and capital budget, 2019 draft Transit Commission operating report, 2019 draft Transit Commission capital budget. We have a motion by Councillor Gower. The floor is yours to introduce your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I put forward this motion this morning, actually, with help from the clerk's office. I know there's a lot of discussion around fare freeze, and commend Councillor Menard for the work that he's done to raise awareness and advocate on that issue. I suspect around the council table there's a lot of support for freezing fares for some period of time in the unlikely event that the stage 1 of LRT does not proceed. But I believe it's a discussion that would best take place at Transit Commission, because it does involve policy, it does involve long-term financial planning for transit. And so I'll read the be it resolved, and it's simply that be it resolved that city staff report back on any potential delay of the LRT stage 1 launch date and report back to the Transit Commission and Council on how the remaining transit fares could be frozen and funded to correspond with that future launch date. In short, I want to make sure the door remains open to freeze fares in relation to the start date of LRT and up for further discussion at Transit Commission and then to Council.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Seconded by?
Hoping Councillor Menard would second that.
Councillor Menard, okay.
Thank you.
So, yeah, I think that's fair because it should be at the Transit Commission. So, Councillor Leeper, anything on the motion?
Yeah, quick clarification. How does that work in terms of adjusting the transit fares without going through budget process? Do they have the flexibility next September to determine they want to extend a fare freeze, pass that at Transit Commission, and then come to Council?
Yeah, it'll have to go to Council, but it'll need a revenue source either by within the Transit Commission or citywide to find the revenue.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the Treasurer and I would need to work out the details, but there's lots of things that need to go into this, whether or not we're moving it or not and so forth. And I think that's the dialogue we bring back to Transit Commission, the what and the how.
I just want to make sure that that flexibility is there before voting in favor of this motion?
It's there as we presently know it, and if you know this right now, you're freezing right till July 1st, so there's lots of runway there. But if things change, then we'll adjust. We'll time the report accordingly so we don't run out of space.
But it wouldn't be ruled out of order to extend a fare freeze between budget cycles?
No, it would not.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Okay, so on the motion, carried. So Councillor Menard, your motion is then moot. Next is Councillor Kavanaugh. I think you found a revenue source, Councillor. I believe the Treasurer informs me. So if you'd like to introduce your motion, please.
Yes, thank you very much. This is in regards to the Equipass, Community Pass, and Access Pass, which are for low-income people. We're proposed a 2.5% fare increase in our budget, which would be a hardship on these low-income people. We're looking at an amount of $81,000. We just approved a transit system of over $4 billion. This is quite a small drop in the bucket. This is about freezing fares for this year. The calculation is very small, and I do have a source of revenue for it, and that comes out of the investment income on page 108 of the FedCo budget.
Okay, and your seconder, Councillor?
It's Councillor McKinney.
McKinney. On the motion, carried. Thank you for finding a source. Transit Commission portion of the budget as amended. Carried. Item I, the amended Information Technology Subcommittee portion of the 2019 draft operating and capital budget. Carried. Item J, FedCo portion of the operating budget is amended by the $2.4 million reduction to the Ottawa Police Services from the city's tax rate stabilization fund as recommended by FedCo. Carried. Approve the city treasurer be delegated to the authority to make the necessary adjustments to 29 operating budget and to make necessary authority and debt financing adjustments to the 2019 draft capital budget to reflect the decisions of City Council. Carried. Item 9, approve the city manager or his delegate to authorize to make application for any subsidies or grants on the city's behalf, and that the city clerk and solicitor be delegated the authority to amend the bylaws and approve and execute necessary agreements in order to implement the decisions of council. Carried. Item 10, approve as recommended the standing committees. Do you want me to read the whole thing? It's no. Okay. Item 10, carried. Item 11, carried. Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Recognize. Thank you. I just want to follow up on a question I asked yesterday about your budget, Mr. Mayor. Because in the 2018 budget, Council approved $849,000 for the mayor's budget, and yet it says in the 2019 budget document that we approved $929,000. So that's not what we approved. And then when I asked that question to the treasurer, she said it was correcting something historical, but didn't have the details and promised to get them. So I'd just like to hear the answer.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I haven't had an opportunity to actually get that information yet. I've asked for the detailed calculation as to how they came up with that number. So I did promise, though, I'm going to be providing it to all of you. I expect to have it today's Wednesday, probably by the end of the week, and I'll circulate that.
Okay, well, maybe Mr. Mayor can just ask you because it's your budget. So we approved $849, you spent $912. I just went back and noticed back in 2011 in the Mayor's State of the City address, you began by saying, to begin, we as elected officials need to lead by example. As the mayor, I have directed that my own office budget be cut by 10% or $80,000. So is the $80,000 that it seemed like you think you had the delegated authority to restore to the mayor's budget, the one that the mayor cut, showing the leadership?
It isn't the $80,000. It's the way we applied the $80,000, which caused the base problem, because we applied it to the accounts that actually don't increase. And we should have taken it, we took it from compensation, and we should have taken it from the accounts that don't increase. So as a result, there's been a shortfall. So that's why I've asked to see the detailed calculations to go through to see if in fact it actually adds up to what we've made the adjustment. If it doesn't, we'll make a change in the 2019 budget and reduce it accordingly. But at this point in time, I don't have the calculation to tell you what it should be.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Item 11, approve as recommended the Transportation Committee that staff. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
I'm sorry, but I just have to say that to bring this up again is, to me, something that is more of personal nature than a budget item. And I would say that, you know, we all know that when staff at the city get an increase, they accommodate our budgets in case our staff get an increase. But if any of us say that our staff are not going to get the same increase, then we don't get that extra money incrementally. So I think that that's important to note. I also can tell you that when it comes to budgets, if you look around the table at the fact of how divided it is on size of wards, on the amount of monies being the same, et cetera. That's another conversation we're going to have this year when we get to the ward boundary review, because there's an absolute imbalance. I think we need to use the same nest egg, perhaps, but it definitely needs to be shifted around. So the lessons learned that you learned from the adjustments that you made that have caused the mayor's budget to be in this place, please take that in consideration when we have that conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I neglected to put before committee, the Standing Committee on Environment Protection, Water and Waste Management, the rate supported portion of the budget. On the rate supported, carried. Item 11, approve as recommended by the Transportation Committee that staff identify options for permanent traffic calming measures on King Edward Avenue, including reducing the curb lanes from 4.5 to 3.5 in both directions of King Edward north of Rideau Street, including the associated funding requirements, report back to the Transportation Committee. Not sure why that's in the budget.
That was carried through committee.
Yeah, no, but we have to approve it now. So on the motion, carried. On the overall budget as amended, carried. So motion to rise and report. Councillor Hubley, seconded by Councillor McKenney, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that the Committee of the Whole rise and report to City Council.
Carried. Motion to adopt budget reports. Councillor Hubley and McKenney.
That the 2019 draft operating and capital budgets listed as item 1 to 15 on the agenda as set out below, and including all matters approved in Committee of the Whole through the roadmap motion, be received and adopted as amended.
Carried. Before we go to motion to adopt reports, for the record, I want to note that the technical amendment from Councillor Harder that was approved during the consent agenda with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment to 807 River Road and 4720 Spratt Road, this motion amended item F on the bulk consent agenda, not item G. It's a big change, I know, but I hope everyone will support that. Motion to adopt reports, Councillor Hubley. Whoops.
I have 51, Louisa.
Oh, yes, okay, go ahead. Sorry, I had it right here and I forgot. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This went to Planning Committee last week, and I wasn't able to attend and speak to it, but I feel that that I really should. This is an application to allow for a parking lot in the downtown. We have a lot of parking lots in the downtown. We just approved several billion to build light rail, which will include Gladstone Station just down the street from 54 Louisa. And the more parking that we allow, the more parking lots that we allow in the downtown, I can tell you the less people will travel on transit. This one in particular is as a result of the apartments on Bell Street. They used to be referred to as the Bell Street Towers. Many people who have lived in the city long enough remember the Bell Street Towers are now called Live Apartments. And when they reno-evicted because there were a lot of families living on lower incomes, living in these buildings. When they changed over the building, it became a much higher end. We lost a lot of families. The building provides today 106 parking spaces, 60 off-site in 2 locations within 1 block. And now today they're back asking for another 40. And the reason they are is because we brought it up. People in the community we're seeing that cars were coming and going. This apartment actually billets itself as a short-term rental. We've got ads for them, 1-bedroom weekly rate, 2-bedroom weekly rates. This is happening in the downtown, and not only is that allowed, but now we're going to give them access to what was essentially an illegal parking lot, so that they have even more space for people to park. And I just want to remind my colleagues what happens. And again, especially in the downtown, we are peppered with parking lots that shouldn't be there. Residents have spent, and community associations have spent decades trying to get us to move away from these illegal parking lots. And what happens, we had one when I was first elected at the corner of O'Connor and Gloucester. That came, asked for a 3-year extension. We gave it to them. That was 4.5 years ago. And when I asked, so what happens after 3 years, that extension? Well, apparently I'm supposed to keep track of that. Apparently the hundreds of parking lots in the downtown that have got extensions, it's up to me or residents to ensure that when their license is up, that we're making them come back here. So I would ask my colleagues to support me in denying yet another parking lot. This is the second one outside of the actual parking that they had available on site. There's enough parking now for almost everyone and their dog in this building. And we've just spent a winter, as a matter of fact, going after this same company because they dump all of their snow on the sidewalk on Louisa. So a busy downtown block, few blocks away from what will be the Gladstone station. We've got snow dumped on, and I can send you pictures. It's mountains, of snow, and we're running a concierge. Service here. It's daily and weekly, essentially a hotel. So I would just ask my colleagues to support me in denying this application. Thank you. Do the right thing. Thank you. For the downtown. Thank you.
On the committee recommendation. Oh, Councillor Fleury again.
Yeah, just wanted to jump in with on my colleague's point, and my question really is to Mr. Willis, because we've carried that same issue at the Cathedral parking lot, and I want to understand what tools do we have? They're called temporary parking, but then we're caught, they become permanent parking. So can you explain to me why a temporary condition cannot be removed, and what's the risk in this case?
So Mr. Mark can assist me on the law on this, but under the Planning Act, if a use is not permitted in a zoning bylaw, which this a standalone parking lot would not be permitted, people can apply for what's called a temporary use bylaw approval by council, which is what this recommendation is before you today, and the law limits that to 3 years maximum, although council does have the right to extend it for any number of times at council's discretion. So the end to this becomes, and this exists in the law in Ontario because the economic cycles drive the interest in developing sites. We use demolition control to prevent sites generally from turning into parking lots, to avoid it. But when the sites are actually demolished and there's nothing going on, the use for parking as a temporary use can be a reasonable request in many circumstances, although not all.
So you haven't been clear. If we were to approve this today, is there a mechanism to not approve it in 3 years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, council would have to be asked again in 3 years, and council can choose to approve or not approve in 3 years.
But we were advised on the cathedral file that, which is exactly the same condition, that the rights have been established even through this temporary condition. So what options does council really have in 3 years?
I have a different understanding as it relates to the cathedral file than what you just stated. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that through what the councillor just stated, we'll go back and review that one separately. I don't believe they've established legal non-conforming rights as a result of that. They would require an extension like anyone else would. And so council has the chance now, has a chance in 3 years on this site. Should they ask to be extended, they may not. That is your discretion as council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gower.
Briefly, at Planning Committee, it's worth noting that the proponent, and I'm paraphrasing, said if they were to come back in 3 years with another temporary request for temporary parking extension under the circumstances in 3 years when LRT would be in place, they wouldn't have much of a leg to stand on. So I think we should keep that in mind if they ever come back to committee in a few years. I also believe that this is outside of a land use question. It has more to do with short-term accommodations. I reluctantly supported the report coming to council at planning, but I believe it's really an issue of short-term accommodations and the impact that's having, which I know we'll be reviewing soon at another committee.
All right, so on the Planning Committee recommendation, carried, dissent by Councillor McKenney and Leaper and Fleury, and Menard and Eglai. Okay, next is motion to, have we done the motion to adopt reports? Okay, so Councillor Hubley and McKenney, that duo back together again. Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're almost at the end of our friendship here, and one of us will be filing for divorce at the adjournment motion, but until we get there, it's motion to adopt reports so that the remaining following reports, excluding those items previously adopted by council as part of the budget, be received and adopted as amended. Do you want me to read them out, Mr. Mayor?
I think we can dispense. Carried.
Okay.
Motions of which notice have been previously given. Motion dont avait été donnée entièrement. Councillor Moffat, seconded by Councillor Menard.
Thanks. This is a motion to reconsider the this is just a motion to approve Michelle Kearney as the city's current representative on the Source Protection Committee. So therefore be resolved that the council approve the selection of Michelle Kearney to sit as representatives for the City of Ottawa on the Mississippi Rideau Source Protection Committee and direct the city clerk and solicitor to provide a copy of this resolution to the CPC before March 29th, 2019.
On the motion, carried. Motion requiring suspension of the rules of procedure. Councillor Fleury on Harder on Joliet Avenue. On suspension, carried. Councillor Fleury, you have the floor.
Merci, Mr. Mayor. Last time I'll speak today. Carried. Okay, I'm good. Carried. Good. If it's carried, I'm good.
on the motion, this is 240, 242, 244 Fernland Avenue, 4343A Joliet Avenue demolition control. Carried. On suspension of the rules, Councillor El Shantiri on police board appointments. On rules of procedure be waived. Carried. Councillor El Shantiri.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will read the motion just to remind my colleague. With the council meeting of February 27, 2019, City Council considered the report titled Appointment Ottawa Police Service Board. And whereas technical amendment motion was approved at council meeting, replacing the report recommendation as follows, that appointment of Sandy Smallwood to the Ottawa Police Service Board be approved with an amendment term to expire in 2 years, and whereas upon reviewing the staff notes from the selection panel meeting held on January 15, 2019, with Councillors Deans, Al-Shantiri, Meehan, and Robin Guest as representative of the Mayor's office, it was determined that the notes were consistent with the appointment report, and where Mr. Smallwood expressed a willingness to serve a 4-year term as well as has years of experience and understanding of the Ottawa Police Service Board. Therefore, be it resolved, Council approved the appointment of Mr. Leo A., known Sandy Smallwood, to the Ottawa Police Service Board, including waiver of Section 2.1 of Appointment Policy for the term of Council.
Councillor Deans.
Mr. Mayor, this is a reconsideration motion requiring, what, 2/3?
No, it doesn't.
Why doesn't it, Mr. O'Connor, can you take your seat?
I'm not sure why it does, because there was a motion at council that dealt with the fact, my understanding was when we were approached, there was some concern whether he could be appointed a full 4-year term.
No.
And it's been determined that he's willing to serve 4 years, and he's an experienced member, and I think he should be given
Look,
that opportunity.
nobody thinks that Mr. Smallwood is not an exceptional member of the Police Services Board, but the term was a 2-year term. And somehow someone slipped into council a 4-year term and asked for a waiver of the rules to allow an extension of a term to the end of the term for 4 years. And Councillor Meehan and I were, and Councillor Al-Shantiri were the 3 members of the selection committee. And Robin Guest sat in from the mayor's office. And Ms. Guest said she had no recollection of what happened. Carol Ann and I both know that this was not discussed at the selection committee. There was no recommendation for an extension.
Point of order, Councillor Moffat.
I don't think it's fair for the member to speak about someone that's not at this table, that can't represent themselves at this table, to say what they said or how they recollected that meeting.
Okay, well, Councillor Al-Shantiri raised that, so I was just commenting on it.
You mentioned someone that isn't a councillor that was at that meeting, and you said you just spoke on their behalf.
Councillor Al-Shantiri raised that she was there.
You said that you said she had no recollection
Okay, well,
of it.
I don't think we need a back and forth. My point is,
because you're wrong.
My point is, in all probability, Mr. Smallwood would get another appointment until the end of the term. Nobody's disagreeing with that. It's just that the rules said it was a 2-year term. The selection committee did not recommend different than that, and then somehow somebody slipped onto the council agenda an extension of the term, which was not correct. So we corrected the record, and council passed that. So today, based on the motion passed by council, if there's to be a change, it should be a reconsideration 2/3. Is that correct, Mr. O'Connor?
Mr. Mayor, you've already ruled on this issue?
Yep. Okay, thank you. On the motion?
Yes and nays.
Yeas and nays for appointment for the full 4-year term.
Councillor Harder.
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli.
No.
Councillor Gower.
Yes.
Councillor McKenney.
Yes.
Councillor Eglai.
Yes.
Councillor Luloff.
Oui.
Councillor Suds.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington.
Yes.
Councillor Meehan.
I know. I don't know how to vote. I mean, I know that.
Just vote yes. That's what I'm going to do.
No.
Councillor Dudas.
Yes.
Councillor Cloutier.
Oui.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Yes.
Councillor Menard.
Yes.
Councillor Fleury.
Oui.
Councillor Hubley.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes.
Councillor El-Shantiri.
Yes.
Councillor Leeper.
Yes.
Councillor Tierney.
Yes.
Councillor Deans?
No.
Councillor Derues? Councillor Blais?
Yes.
Mayor Watson?
Yes. Motion,
19 yeas.
notice is a motion for consideration at subsequent meetings. Councillor Menard, are you still moving your
That'll come to Environment Committee.
Environment Committee? Okay, so anyone else have a notice of motion for consideration at a subsequent meeting? Motion to introduce bylaws. Councillor Hubley and McKenney, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the bylaws listed on the agenda under the motion to introduce bylaws, 3 readings, be read and passed.
On the motion, carried. Confirmation bylaw, Councillor Hubley, please. Whoops,
That
hold on just a
the
second.
following bylaw be read and passed to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting of March 6, 2019.
On the motion, carried. Councillor Menard, do you have another motion, not the TD one? Oh, it is.
Yes, I do have another one. I thought you were referring to a different one, Mr. Mayor. So I do have the TD one. I'll just read the therefore be it resolved, that's okay?
Yes.
That the City of Ottawa grant an exemption to bylaw number 2003-237 to the Ottawa Sports Entertainment Group, OSEG, to allow for the use of smoke devices for Fury games starting April 1st, 2019 until December 31st, 2022 for home games and playoff games if required, and granting OSEG an exemption from Section 17 of the bylaw, which requires a permit application to be made 30 days in advance to the proposed use, subject to OSEG meeting all other permit requirements of the bylaw, including Section 18, to the satisfaction of the fire chief.
And your seconder is?
Seconder is Riley.
Riley, the smoke might blow into Riley's ward. You sure you want to do that, Riley? Okay. Did you have another notice of motion, Councillor Menard? Okay. Any written inquiries, Madam Deputy Clerk? Adjournment, Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You ready for this, Catherine? It's been fun. That the proceedings of the City Council meeting of March 6, 2019 be adjourned. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Adjourned, and obviously we will not need the Friday morning meeting, so thank